This amazing story begins in a small town where a boy named Thomas lived. The most mysterious thing about him was that he could see dead people, and even sense events before they happened. One day, while Thomas was at home, a girl suddenly appeared before him. She didn't say a word, but Thomas instantly knew she was a spirit. Curious, he began following her to see where she would lead him. The girl took him to a man sitting inside a car. Thomas didn't know what to do, but then the spirit placed her hand on him, triggering a vivid vision. In it, he saw exactly what had happened. The man had assaulted the woman and then brutally killed her. Furious, Thomas decided he would get justice for the soul, even if it meant killing the man himself. The man, realizing he was in danger, ran, but Thomas couldn't let a murderer go free. After a short chase, he caught him, and the police chief arrived just in time. Thomas explained everything, and the man was arrested. The police chief already knew Thomas and even knew about his strange abilities. The next day, however, Thomas experienced something even stranger. He noticed people without faces, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, grabbing him and trying to drag him away. There were more and more of them, and they were terrifying. Just when Thomas was struggling, someone appeared with a gun and shot them all. Thomas was hit by a bullet and felt excruciating pain, but then realized it had all been a dream. Still, it was deeply disturbing. Shaking it off, Thomas went to his part-time job as a chef at a restaurant, where his cooking was loved by everyone. The police chief and one of Thomas's friends often stopped by to spend time there. But then Thomas noticed something chilling, strange, invisible creatures moving around inside the restaurant, unseen by everyone else. These were demons from hell, drawn to death itself. Whenever a person was about to die, these creatures would hover nearby, growing stronger with every death. Thomas saw them circling a man and knew something terrible was going to happen to him. If too many people died, the creature's power could grow to unstoppable levels. He decided to follow the man and keep him safe. But before he could act, his friend Rose showed up, talking about a weird dream she had, one where she saw herself and another person die. At first, Thomas wasn't interested, but when Rose described how it happened, he was shocked. It matched the same faceless beings he'd seen in his own dreams. Realizing the danger, Thomas told Rose to go somewhere safe while he continued tailing the man, whose name was Lang. The invisible creatures were swarming him, a sure sign that Lang's death was near and that he might cause serious harm before it happened. Thomas followed him closely, watching every move. Lang stopped by his house to drop off something, then drove off. Seizing the opportunity, Thomas slipped into Lang's house to investigate. The place was a mess, filled with clutter. It was clear Lang didn't live alone. In the cupboards, Thomas found files from different locations, with strange symbols marked on calendars. On certain dates, there were ominous crosses drawn, signs that Lang was planning something big. But what exactly was it? Thomas knew he had to find out the truth. While searching Lang's house, he noticed a door that almost seemed to be calling him, as if someone inside knew he was coming and was asking for help. A sudden chill ran through him, but he pushed forward toward the storeroom. When he opened the door, frost began forming everywhere. It wasn't real, only Thomas could see it. Inside, he found several birds locked in cages. He started looking for more evidence, never expecting how bad things were about to get. Then, he spotted a small hole above a cupboard. Slowly, it began to widen. When Thomas reached in, something started pulling him inside. The hole expanded into a massive opening, and something began emerging from it. Terrified, Thomas hid inside a cupboard. From there, he saw dozens of those invisible creatures pouring out. It was a doorway to hell itself, right here in Lang's house. These beings were spreading rapidly, and Thomas knew the more of them there were, the more human lives would be lost. Now he was certain Lang was planning something dangerous for the city. He looked like a criminal who could easily cause massive destruction. Thomas gathered as many files as he could and rushed to the police chief, telling him everything. The chief trusted Thomas from the start and agreed to have his team keep Lang under surveillance. He even assigned another officer, Mike, to help Thomas with the investigation. The next day, Thomas was with his best friend, Lena, enjoying the view from the top of a tower. He wanted to propose to her, to spend his life with her. But then he spotted Lang, furious and walking straight toward him. Thomas immediately grabbed Lena and ran, not wanting her caught up in his problems. Suddenly, they found themselves in a bowling alley. Thomas had no idea how they got there. Then it struck him. Maybe it was one of his internal powers, teleporting him without his control. He still didn't fully understand his abilities, but for now, he tried to ignore it. While in the bowling alley, Thomas started feeling uneasy. The employees' costumes reminded him of his dream, the one where faceless people attacked him. The creatures weren't visible, but something about the place felt wrong. Trusting his instincts, Thomas called the police chief, warning him that something dangerous might happen there. A senior officer arrived, but instead of helping, he scolded Thomas. He claimed Thomas's information was wrong. He'd checked Lang's house and found nothing suspicious. Lang, he said, worked in an office all day. The officer even asked how Thomas knew these things. Thomas couldn't explain without revealing his secret. Sensing tension, Lena distracted the officer by asking about a tattoo on his hand, but he wouldn't say much. Still, Thomas felt something strange, like all these bizarre events had a deeper meaning. Later, Thomas and Lena visited their friend Rose, the one who had visions of her own death. They questioned her in detail, and she described exactly what Thomas expected, confirming his fears. Thomas urged her to take her children and stay with her grandmother, telling her not to inform anyone beforehand for safety. Upstairs, Thomas checked on Rose's children, only to see dozens of invisible creatures surrounding them. It was a clear sign that something terrible was about to happen to Rose's family. He hid his reaction, insisting she leave immediately. Soon after, Thomas and Lena rode away on a motorcycle, trying to make sense of all the horrors happening around them. Then, out of nowhere, they heard the desperate screams of a woman. We then see a terrified woman running for her life. She turns out to be none other than the friend of police officer Mike. 2 rabid dogs were chasing her, blood streaming from her wounds as she tried desperately to escape. Just as the dogs were about to attack, an unknown man fired shots at them. Tragically, one bullet hit the woman instead, killing her instantly. Hearing the gunfire, Thomas and Lena rushed to help, but it was already too late. The shooter was in tears, clearly distraught over what had happened. Within minutes, the police chief and several officers arrived to investigate. Everyone assumed the man had tried to help but accidentally killed her. Mike was devastated. He had just met with his friend that very morning. The police chief was also puzzled, but Thomas approached him and explained that he had seen the same kind of dogs near Lang's house earlier. This shifted suspicion toward Lang. The police officer in charge requested further investigation into Lang, but the senior officer, the same one Thomas had met before, dismissed his claims. Thomas and Lena, however, refused to back down. Concerned for her safety, Thomas took Lena straight home. When Thomas got home, he was shocked. Lang's dead body was lying in his bathtub, killed by a gunshot. Panicked, Thomas tried to move the body. If the police saw it there, they would surely think he was the killer. He suspected Lang's associates were behind the murder, not wanting the police to get too close and ruin their plans. Acting quickly, he covered the body and hid it inside a factory. As Thomas drove through town, he noticed a disturbing sight: massive numbers of invisible creatures hovering around every house. These hellspawn beings were gathering in alarming quantities, a clear sign that something big was about to happen. Thomas knew he had to act fast before disaster struck. Meanwhile, at the police chief's home, the doorbell rang. An unknown man armed with a gun fired multiple shots at the chief, leaving him severely injured. He was rushed to the hospital. When Thomas heard the news, he went there immediately. The police chief's wife thanked him. Earlier, Thomas had given the chief a special locket, and when the bullets hit, the locket had deflected one, saving his life. The chief still suffered minor injuries, but without Thomas's foresight, he might have died. Thomas had seen a hazy glimpse of the future, which is why he gave the chief the locket in the first place. Now determined to investigate alone, Thomas went straight to Lang's house, hoping to find clues on his computer. Checking the browser history, he discovered Lang had been researching dark magic, the occult, and disturbing activities on the dark web, including vans linked to sinister purposes. It became clear that Lang and his associates were trying to open the gates of hell. While Thomas was still searching, strange noises came from the kitchen. Cautiously, he opened the fridge. Inside was rotting human flesh crawling with insects. Lang and his gang were not only evil but brutally violent toward humans. As Thomas closed the fridge, Lang's ghost appeared, furious and aggressive. The spirit began hurling objects at him, even throwing the fridge itself, but Thomas managed to dodge. Then Lang's ghost opened a gas cylinder, filling the house with fumes. Thomas leapt out the window just before a massive explosion destroyed the house. Driving away, Thomas remembered a strange mark he'd seen on Lang's body. He went back to the factory to check again and found the letters POD tattooed on him, the same mark he'd seen on the senior officer's arm. POD stood for Prince of Darkness, a group of Satan's followers determined to open Hell's gates and unleash its creatures into the human world. Anyone with this mark was part of the same network. Thomas realized the senior officer had been there earlier when he'd urged the police chief to keep an eye on Lang, and, as a loyal member of the satanic group, the senior officer didn't want Lang jeopardizing their plan. So he had killed Lang himself and planted the body in Thomas's home. Even worse, this same senior officer was the one who had shot the police chief. By now, Thomas had a deep understanding of the entire case, enough to finally decide how to stop it all. He suggested to Lena that she leave the city, warning her that things were about to get much worse. But Lena refused to leave him behind. Thomas was relieved and even happy to know she would stand by his side. They both set out for work. As Thomas approached his restaurant, he spotted a police officer's car parked nearby. Instantly, he suspected the senior officer had come to kill him. Moving cautiously, Thomas entered the building, only to find the security guards dead. Nearby stood a masked police officer. Believing it to be the same senior officer, Thomas attacked him with a baseball bat. But when the mask came off, it was Mike, the officer the police chief had assigned to help him. This meant Mike was working with the enemy too. Thomas grabbed a gun and headed straight to a nearby mall. Inside, he spotted Rose, who still hadn't taken her children out of the city as he had advised. Desperate, he tried to convince her to leave immediately, warning her that all the visions she had seen were about to come true. As he looked around, Thomas noticed the exact details from Rose's visions: the bowling alley staff, the television playing, the water falling in the fountain. Then, a woman's scream pierced the air. A masked man had begun firing wildly, killing several people. Panic spread through the mall, but all the doors had been locked. No one could escape. Gun in hand, Thomas moved toward the shooter. But suddenly, a swarm of invisible creatures jumped on him, attacking for the first time ever. Until now, they had only observed dying humans, feeding on their internal energy. Thomas realized they had known all along that he could see them. They had simply waited for the right moment to strike. Today, with so many people trapped inside, they wanted to kill and feed on everyone. Fighting his way past the creatures, Thomas finally reached the shooter and shot him dead. Removing the mask, he saw it was the same man who had killed Mike's friend, another member of the Demon's network. Rushing to the cake shop, Thomas found Lena safe and unharmed. Relieved, he was about to take her outside when the spirit of the woman who had just died appeared to him, leading him toward a truck. Opening it, Thomas was horrified. It was loaded with massive bombs. It became clear, the senior officer and his allies planned to blow up the mall, killing everyone inside to give the creatures a surge of power. Thomas refused to let that happen. But before he could act, one of the creatures possessed the senior officer's body and attacked him. Barely escaping, Thomas climbed into the truck and drove it away, knowing that as long as the bombs remained there, no one was safe. The possessed senior officer gave chase, climbing inside the truck. In a tense struggle, Thomas managed to trick him and escape just as the truck tumbled into a lower area. The explosion killed the senior officer instantly. With the death of every Prince of Darkness, the remaining creatures lost their strength. Exhausted, Thomas collapsed and woke up the next day to see Lena by his side. Unable to wait any longer, he confessed his love for her, promising marriage. She returned his feelings, and they shared a warm, intimate moment. But the next day, the police chief and his wife invited Thomas to their home to reveal a heartbreaking truth. The Lena he had been with was not alive. She had died in the cake shop that day. The woman he had loved all this time was her spirit. Thomas was left alone, forced to accept this painful reality. And with that, this strange, tragic, and extraordinary story came to an end.